We've been looking at, in fact, this is the last lesson on this topic, Jesus in the Ten Commandments. Now, why would we conclude it? Because we're on number 10, Mike. It's hard to look at Jesus in the Ten Commandments if we start looking at 12 or 14, huh? So, Jesus in the Ten Commandments. So we're in Exodus, the 20th chapter, and we are going to look at verse 17 as we deal with what commandment today? Do not what? Covet. Do not covet. No covetousness. And so we will look at what Jesus has to say and also what it means for our lives today. Would someone read verse 17 of Exodus 20 for us?
Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's.
Thank you. So, if we were to turn over to Deuteronomy, the 5th chapter, and we see the Ten Commandments given there in Deuteronomy, the reading's a little different. In fact, let's do that rather than you taking my word for it. Deuteronomy 5, the Ten Commandments are given here as well. And we find in verse 21 this commandment. And what you'll notice, it's obviously the same commandment, but you'll notice some additions to it, and you'll notice the order is different. This is Deuteronomy 5 and 21. Would someone read that for us?
Neither shalt thou desire thy neighbor's wife, neither shalt thou covet thy neighbor's house, his fields, his manservants, or his maidservants, his ox or his ass, or anything that is thy neighbor's.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. So you see the order a little bit different there, and you see the addition of what? What's the addition in Deuteronomy? It's probably hard to do that without having the two side by side. Okay. Yes, and that is simply verbiage. The meaning is the same between coveting, but great observation, Bob. What addition is there in this one? Right after his house in Deuteronomy 5. His property or his field. Now, why would that be included in Deuteronomy and not Exodus? It has to do with the context of when the books were written. Yes, and I didn't hear what you said, Sharon. Yes, they did not have any land. In fact, they didn't have it in Deuteronomy either, but they were about to get it, right? So there's the commandment's the same, but the relevance is different. The context is different. So the book of Exodus is written at the time of Mount Sinai, right? Right after they've left Egypt. Deuteronomy, which Deut means second, Ronmi, giving of the law. It's the second time it was given, and they were reminded of the law right before they started the conquest of Canaan. So we see that addition, that don't covet his fields or his property, right? Because that's something that they were going to have. Now, let me ask you this, as we turn our minds back to Exodus 20, it really doesn't matter which place you are. Is this a sin that's relevant for us today? Is covetousness something we deal with today? Absolutely. So, let me ask you this, and this is why we looked at the comparison in Deuteronomy. Is the list given here in either place, but we're going to look at Exodus, that we are not to covet our neighbor's wife, or Sharon for you, that means husband. Okay. Not to covet our neighbor's wife, the male servant, female servant, his ox, his donkey, or anything that's your neighbor's. Is that a complete list? I know anything that's your neighbor's is kind of exhaustive. Why are those specific things given?
They would have issues with them.
It's representative of things that are commonly coveted, right? What is coveted today? What's this list look like for you or for me? Or maybe it's easier to talk about Dad, right? We can make his list. There have slight differences for each of us, but generally speaking, there's a lot of overlap, isn't there? Start with what's similar. What's the same?
The wife, possessions,
Generally possessions, yeah. Absolutely. So those possessions are different today. The property is the same, right? The concept of a house is the same. What's the parallel to the neighbor's donkey or oxen? Car, I think, would be perfect illustration, right? Or Harley, your neighbor's Harley. There you go. Yes. There's also probably some different parallels to the same things, isn't there? They weren't scooting around on their donkey or oxen to show off, were they? What were they using these things for? Transportation's one reason, yeah. What else are they using it for? Livelihood. Yeah, tools. Right? That really nice snap-on stuff, David. Right? Tools are there. Some of you, most of you probably don't have this challenge, but man, I think libraries are incredible, right? I've got a small collection of books. Lee, when he was making my bookshelves, said they were way too many books, and I need to get updated with electronic books, and I have lots of those on my phone and on my computer too, right? Tools, they vary, right? I don't covet David's Snap-on tools too much, but man, a stack of books looks really good to me, right? All kind of different things along those lines. What about the male and female servants? The reason I ask that, think about this while I'm on there, and I hadn't seen Fred's name on the list this morning, but it's good to see your name, Fred. Good to have you with us as well. Sometimes it's easy, we see that male and female maid servant or servant in there, and it follows wife or spouse. So it's easy to think that that's talking about a lustful type of covetousness, but I'm not really sure that's what the context is talking about.
Say you have, let's put it in today's terms, maybe you have a factory and you need skilled technicians to work in that factory, and your competitor has them. So really you're coveting those people that your company, your adversary has, and you try to snag them out from under them, by offering them better wages and whatever. But that's really a type of covetousness.
Okay, yeah, desire, like Mike's talking about, these human resources, right? They're beneficial, absolutely. What else is there lying under the surface with almost all of these things? Just under the surface that is probably closer to what we covet the most generally? Wealth, absolutely. And that is the first layer just under the surface. And what does wealth really symbolize mostly? Power, status, right? Yeah. Now, wealth and status aren't synonymous, are they? But they're two things that are oftentimes connected, right? I think part of what the command is getting at when it's talking about the oxen, the donkeys, the servants, that's status, right? And Mike, a lot of what you were talking about, there's a financial reward to that, but there's also status to that, right? We are very concerned with status, aren't we? Generally speaking. There's something to put out here that I think is useful. In our day of social media, I know a week or so ago, well, last week we dealt significantly with social media, and I'll mention it in a different way. Have you ever seen the memes that show my post versus real life? You know, the post where I'm dressed immaculately, everything behind me is in its proper place and looks really good, and then just off the screen, the kids are pulling each other's hair out, the place is a mess, right? I bring that up as we talk about covetousness today to illustrate this. We usually covet or want to feel the way other people look. We want to feel the way other people look. You think about our sermon last week where we talked about what our eyes are focused on and what they're not focused on. Boy, it's easy to look at other people, that competitor in business that has it all, right? And what are we focusing on? His assets. And completely miss the struggles, the liabilities, all the other side of that equation, right? And the thing is, we will never feel the way other people look. I had a young man with me that went to Farriers Convention one time. We were watching the guys compete. And he said, wow, I want to do that. There's a lot of hours represented there, a lot of work. And he was just starting a business out. And I told him, I said, Chad, I said, bear in mind, what you're seeing is the result of people not making money, but spending money. You're starting a business. Yeah, but look at them. They're so good. And it occurred to me what he was really after. And I questioned him about it. He agreed. I hope it was helpful for the short time he had with it. I said, Chad, you're looking at these people with such awe, right? Yeah. I said, you'd like to feel the result of that awe. Yeah. I said, guess what? You're not about to walk up and tell those guys how great you think they are. They don't even feel what you think they have. You see what I'm saying? We look at that and we hold people in different levels of accomplishment up. But when you're there, you don't feel that. So we'll never feel the way other people look. Meaning, it's an endless race, right? It's an endless race in life. Covetousness. Anything else on that? Ernie looks like he's got a good thought.
Lower your expectations.
There you go. Yeah. Blessed is he with low expectations, right? Shall not be disappointed. There's an element of that, isn't there? And I guess this is what I'm trying to point out laying under the surface. this thing of covetousness that's so tempting is a very non-fulfilling circle. There will always be things we don't have. And much of what we really desire is things that have to be solved from within. And I don't mean to exempt the work of the Lord in that. In fact, that's exactly the foundation of that. All right, so how did Jesus deal with covetousness? Well, let's go. We're going to go to two different places. Luke 12:13. Now, before we read the direct, I'm going to read a couple verses in chapter 12, 1 through 3, before we get to the text that we want to look at for this. In the meantime, when so many thousands of the people had gathered together, of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. Nothing is covered up that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. Therefore, whatsoever you have said in the dark shall be heard in the light, and what you have whispered in private rooms shall be proclaimed on the housetops. Tonight, as we look at the teachings of Jesus, oh, is that what happened? Oh, the battery went dead the other day, Wednesday, and I forgot to replace it. I think I do. I'm surprised it turned on at all. Christian's back on his feet. You see that? He was awake for like a total of 4 hours yesterday. But a whole group were meeting at Hershey this weekend from PCC, and he woke up Friday. He was awake for like 2 hours. Said, "Dad, I feel so much better. I can go to Hershey this weekend." He was going to drive there himself. Said, "Yeah, I don't think so." So he got up, came over, woke up around noon, came over here for about 2 hours of Fall Fest. Went back home, went back to bed yesterday, but he's improving. Yesterday was the first he was out of the house in about 8 days. So, and you're good being around him as long as you don't kiss him. So, all right, back to the Pharisees here. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. It's hypocrisy. And, you know, we can think about so many things about the secret sins that Jesus is talking about in that passage. But he's really talking about motives, isn't he? I think that's significant because all these people are thronging around Jesus and to the point that they're trampling one another. And this is a situation that happens not just on Black Friday shopping occasions. This happens spiritually, I think, around churches all the time. And Jesus is calling out and he's saying, hey, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. These were people who were on the outside who had all their ducks in a row. And inside, Jesus says, you're as rotten as graves. Essentially is what Jesus told them. So that is the backdrop to what Jesus is talking about. Look, if you would, then at verses 13 through 21, because Jesus talks directly about covetousness. Someone in the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. But he said to him, Man, who made me judge or arbitrator over you? And he said to them, Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And he told them a parable, saying, The land of a rich man produced plentiful, and he thought to himself, What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grains and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. So there's two different individuals that Jesus is speaking of and to here. Good morning, Megan. It's wonderful to have you with us this morning. Two different individuals that Jesus is talking about. First is a real person, right? It's an individual comes to Jesus and he says, Lord, tell my brother to do what's right. Now, there's all kinds of assumptions made about this situation, and I'm going to draw a point out on that before we go into the parable. Some people profess that because Jesus did not support this man, that he was wrong. He wasn't due the inheritance he was asking for. Others assume and put forth that he was due what was right. And isn't it interesting how quickly we are willing to do what Jesus himself was not willing to do? Jesus, I'm not your judge or your arbitrator. Wow. Something occurs to me, and I'm not sure of all the implications or applications, but people come to preachers, to Christians, to churches all the time to solve problems for them. And we've been told that every question has a black and a white, that the answer to every question is in this book. And so oftentimes we feel obligated to give answers. Now, don't misunderstand me. We have been given all things that pertain to life and godliness. It does not mean that we were given the answer to every question. And it occurs to me by seeing Jesus' response that maybe there's some answers that we need to just stay out of. Make it personal. I need to stay out of. Jesus just said, it's not my business. Now, Jesus does comment on this. What should this person's concern be? What did Jesus point to? This is verse 15. This should be a relatively easy answer, being covetousness. Being we're talking about covetousness. Thank you, Ernie. He says, beware of covetousness. Beware of covetousness. Life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. Your life is not about what you have or don't have. Boy, Jesus just sidestepped completely whether this man rightfully had a claim to what he was asking for. And then he tells this parable, questions on that man or that situation that Jesus is addressing directly. Then Jesus tells this parable. I didn't count it up here. I've counted it before. I think it's 14 times, although it's hard to keep track, that this individual brings up a personal pronoun. 14 times. He's concerned about himself. He's concerned about his property. He's concerned about his possessions. What does he never stop to consider? I think there's at least two answers for it.
Where it came from.
Where it came from. What are you implying, Ernie?
God.
God. The biggest factor of all of it was God. Yeah, I sometimes is puzzled. God says, "Full this night your soul shall be required of you." It seems kind of harsh. I think Jesus' point is, you didn't stop to consider God. What else do you not consider? Those around him. The two most important things. Oh, we do not have any temptation to have similar problems in our life, do we? It's going to be someone else's. It's going to be people around you. And God. Right? There's the purpose of Scripture. Clear back from Leviticus and Deuteronomy, Jesus said, here's God's plan. Love God, love people. That's what the Ten Commandments are about that we're studying. Right? Didn't even address it. It's easy to get tied up into the day-to-day activities, isn't it? One of the most beneficial things that I started to do years ago, it started with saying, here's what I'm obligated to per month. And then broke that down by work days, 6 days a week. And said, here's why I have to produce 6 days a week, or each day, to break even. At those times, those obligations were high and dear. So I knew, now, after this point of the day, money I make can go to eating and, cable TV and other things, right? Other than that, it's not already spoken for. That led me to make the next logical step and to know what amount of time something costs me. In my mind, it's how many horses do I have to shoe to pay for that. Isn't it interesting? We'd say to one another, if you could buy time, what would you pay for it? The answer for that's real simple. You're already paying for it. It's your hourly wage. Right? That's what you're doing, is you're giving up time for money. And money for other things. Now, some things we have to have, right? Food, shelter, transportation. But think about that. Food isn't always, I've got a picture of really nice steak on my power slide point today. Isn't always a really thick steak. House isn't always a mansion. And transportation is not always a Bentley. Right? Here's my point. That we need to be careful of what we are trading for. I'm not saying luxuries, I'm not saying pleasures are bad. But in a time and age where we all say, I'm too busy, we ought to be very cognizant that covetousness is not the motivating factor behind my busyness. Question or comment? Jesus, I think, striking at the motive of covetousness here, like he has the rest of these. Let's go to one more passage, Mark 10. Would someone read 35 through 45? When you get there, Mark 10, 35 through 45.
James and John, the sons of Zebedee, come unto him saying, Master, we would that thou shouldest do for us whatsoever we shall desire. I think I'm in the right chapter.
Yep.
You say 10, right?
Yep.
Okay. And he said unto them, What would ye that I should do for you? They said unto him, Grant unto us that we may sit one on thy right hand and the other on thy left hand in thy glory. But Jesus said unto them, Ye know not what ye ask. Can ye drink of the cup that I drink of, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? And they said unto him, We can. And Jesus said unto them, Ye shall indeed drink of the cup that I drink of, and with the baptism that I am baptized withal shall ye be baptized. But to sit on my right hand and on my left hand is not mine to give, but it shall be given to them for whom it is prepared. And when the 10 heard it, they began to be much displeased with James and John. But Jesus called them to him and saith unto them, Ye know that they which are accounted to rule over the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and their great ones exercise authority upon them. But so shall it be not be among you, but whosoever will be great among you shall be your minister. Whosoever of you will be the chiefest shall be servant of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, and to give his life a ransom for many.
Thank you. Is this an issue of covetousness? Where are they coveting?
Being on the left and right hand of Christ.
Yeah, prestige and status, right? And it would seem power goes along with those. This is something that plagues people, always has. We tend to look at life as a sum zero gain. It is a finite pie, right? And this is kind of at the heart of covetousness in many cases, certainly envy. So that means when we sit down for a pie together, Bob, the more that I get, the less you have, right? That's how a pie works. There's just so much pie, and man, the more of it I get, the less you have. And so what happens, and notice this going clear back to Exodus, what happens is it's not just about desiring something, it becomes a competitiveness. It's not just a wife or a husband that I desire, it's my neighbor's wife. It's my neighbor's husband. Some of you are thinking about your neighbor's spouse. Some funny faces out there, right? Think about David, right? And in the prophet's words to him, you had a whole flock, David. And you're taken from another. There is so much today about the wealthy, right? And it amuses me in this way, that the poorest among us are still in the top 1% of the world, wealth-wise. If you have running water and sewage, you are in a vast minority, like single-digit minority of the world's population. So who's the wealthy? It gets back to this idea of sum zero gain. It's who has more than I do, right? Jesus said to the disciples, listen, when the Gentiles get power, they lord it over one another. Not so with me. Not so with mine. Philippians is this beautiful picture of Jesus. He thought not robbery to be equal with God, but what? What did he do? Emptied himself. In other words, Jesus used his position to serve others, not to lord over them. And what he's saying to James and John, that what you seek is exactly what you're going to have to give up to be mine. Isn't it interesting that it's in that great fulfillment is found? Wealth, possessions, all the things of this world never provide fulfillment. What Jesus is offering is a purpose that's difficult, but it's worth it. Questions or comments on covetousness, or we've got about 1 minute, 10 Commandments in general as we conclude that. All right, Lord willing, next week we are going to talk about hell. So we'll see how many of you show back up excited for that. Thank you.